is a Strategist episode 1006. My name is Zain Velji. With me, as always, Corey Hogan, Stephen Carter. Guys, are you ready? Are you ready for the UCP leadership results brought to you by Flair Airlines? Always delayed. Carter, what are you thinking?
Well, what I'm thinking is, you're supposed to be the art center.
I am.
Why is there a picture of a green-faced Corey Hogan just over your right arm and your right shoulder? Like, there's a green-faced Corey Hogan. He's green with envy at my strong takes.
It's kind of just a very basic look for white strategist types. But hey, listen,
standard issue white guy.
Yeah, you are doing a thing.
I am doing the thing. The reason I am here is at about off. I'll try to be back because I suspect this is going to take us several hours. But I'm speaking at an event with the Governor General. So yeah, that's going to be fun. Which is the reason I've got suit and tie, which is not my normal attire for those who are used to the LA Dodgers ball cap.
Well, I thought it was big time in us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I thought it was the CBC show. That's why you dressed up. Yeah,
I did not know that. Good looking as not the case.
As we get.
Okay, let's actually start here because I have to go soon. I'll come back. I suspect I'll be back. But I do want to talk about something. Carter, what the hell's going on? So first of all, we were expecting results between the 6 and 7 o'clock Mountain Hour. We're now being pushed to 8. You think this is going to go longer? And what's going on? Give me your hot take on both. Are we going to go past or blow past 8? And what the hell's going on? Corey, same to you in a second.
Corey, I think that 8 is being like that's a really long time from now. I mean, 8 a.m. If we're still doing this at 8 a.m., Corey and I are going to be fucking exhausted. I'm understanding there's going to be childcare issues and everything. So I'm very hopeful that by 8 a.m. this is done. But right now, my bet is probably around 4 a.m. Because as I said to you guys, you have never tried to count preferential ballots by hand. Preferential ballots by hand is a nightmare, an absolute nightmare.
And Corey, it's more of a nightmare. It's assuming so that when it's close, or potentially when it's close. Now, I don't want to inject that into this thing is close or that's what's happening. But there's scrutineers. There's other mechanics to this voting system. Talk to me about what you think's happening, and are we going to go blow past 8 o'clock for the first round results?
I don't know. I mean, like if we do, it's an interesting thing because they were originally supposed to be here between 6 and 7 hours before that. The UCP said, oh shit, we're not on course for that. And so I have to imagine that they made the calculation that 7:30 was safe based on kind of the flow that was happening, how many ballots they were counting a minute for that first ballot result. So I don't know. I'm a little optimistic that the results will come in at 7:30. By the way, is any of us sort of watching Twitter, or how are we even going to know there's results coming in if we're just all talking to each other?
I'm watching Twitter because I don't like watching us.
People will text us. That's fine.
Yeah, we should tell people to text us.
Not my problem. I'm gone in 20 minutes. It doesn't matter. Who gives a shit, Corey?
Very reasonable.
This is going to be your problem, and then I'll come back and I think it'll be my problem again. So I'm guessing it's going to be well past 9 o'clock.
I'm guessing that we get the first round before 8, if only because Stephen Carter seems confident we won't. And that seems like
there's
a pretty
no way, Corey. Like, first of all, they're not going to come with a first round until they have all the rounds counted. They're not going to come in and say, here's round 1, and then go back and count round 2. Like, that's just simply not going to.
They could. It could be a lot of fun.
Oh, man, it would go all night long because I'm betting 5 ballots. 5 ballots.
Oh, you're thinking
because
5
you're the
ballots?
ice cubes? Okay, Corey loves the ice cubes.
Yeah, I do. Corey's fucking loving it. Corey, why are you thinking 5 ballots? Give me the Stephen Carter math here. Do it.
Oh, I don't think it's going to be 5 ballots. He's just throwing words.
Well, you're not Stephen Carter. Let Carter justify it, and then you let you tear him down like you always do. This is the cadence that we have.
First ballot, we drop off the lowest candidate. The lowest candidate's going to have something like 1 or 2%. It's going to be almost non-consequential.
But it depends
whatever the numbers.
Okay, fine.
No, you have to understand. It's going to be 1 or 2%. It always is 1 or 2%. Then the second ballot comes, and the next person's going to get 3 or 4%, and it's 3 or 4%, and that person, drops off. And again, there's not enough there to actually move anybody into a winning position. Number 3 drops off after the third ballot. Number 3, again, maybe is at 8%. Or this is the first ballot and it's all over, but I just don't see that happening. When 3 drops off at 8%, you're still not seeing much. You're seeing like a 4% bump from one of the top candidates because there's attrition rates. There's all kinds. It just doesn't manufacture itself into a big thing. And then finally we get to the fourth ballot. And if it unfolds the way I think it is, the fourth ballot pushes towards Taves, not towards Smith. And that's where we wind up with the fifth ballot, which is Brian Jean dropping off, throwing his support behind Danielle Smith quite inadvertently, which is so on brand for Brian Jean. Like he can't even get his own people to go where he wants them to go. And that's why we have 5 ballots. You're welcome, Corey. I gave that to you.
Corey, what's going to happen?
Smart money is it's going to be 1 or 2 ballots. And I'm basing this on very little. I'll tell you what I'm basing it on. I'm basing it on after our last episode where we were having a conversation about this. A couple of people texted me close to the Danielle Smith campaign saying our IDs are like 45% of what's come in. And, is it not? I don't.
Lies.
Yeah.
I like that nothing phases Carter. It's just a 5 ballot. Here's what's going to happen. It's going to be revealed in a couple of hours. He doesn't care.
Corey, you told me that
dancing around, pretzeling. Just it's perfect.
You told me that when? Like a couple days ago. Right?
Yeah.
And what was my response? If 45% of your IDs are coming back, you're winning on the first ballot.
That's why
it's the first ballot.
That's why
it's not going to be the first ballot. It's not going to happen that way. That's a bullshit number. That's a bullshit number.
Is it a bullshit number? Here's the thing. Probably. That's number one. Probably a bullshit number. Number two, though. If it's not, it's probably low because you never get 100% of your IDs. Like nobody's voter ID is that good. So if you're saying of all of the ballots that have come in, I think I have 45% of them, you probably have 55 or 65%. That's just the reality of it. So, a little bit of hedge there. But the other thing is it does start to feel like just based on how everybody else is acting and the conversations that are going on around here, that they think probably if it's not 50%, it's pretty close. And well, maybe not 2. Maybe it's 1 or 5. Maybe I am with Carter. I haven't decided yet.
1 or 5.
Oh my God. That was a ride that we did not need to take.
Can I just hang on a second? That's the kind of stuff we're going to need if we're going to get through this night.
That's a great
point.
Yeah,
we got some time to kill
Stephen Carter.
We got some time to
Stephen Carter level filling of time. That is a ride we did not need, Flair Airlines. Corey, as it relates to another 2 for 2. I think I'm 2 for 2. Corey, what's something you're watching out for? Like, if you're watching this live stream right now, you don't know how to process these results. You guys have gone into like speculation territory, but like, what are some things you're watching? Give me like a couple bullet points, whether it's a number, whether it's what that number is. We've summarized some of this in previous episodes, but refresh those that haven't necessarily tuned in. What should they be looking for tonight? And then Carter, I want to go to you on that as well.
Well, assuming that we get these results kind of bit by bit, if I see Danielle Smith at around 42 to 45%, I think that's the magic number for her, where it's pretty clear that over the course of the night, she's going to get there. And I suspect with Danielle Smith, it might even be a little bit lower than that for the reason Stephen was talking about with Brian Jean supporters, maybe just saying, yeah, Brian Jean doesn't like her, but fuck it, she seems cool, and deciding to put her as the second choice there. So her number might be 40%. In order to win this thing, or maybe even a little lower on the first ballot, if that Jean support is going to go to her in any kind of sensible way. So that's number one. If I see her coming in the high 30s, I think, oh, well, maybe Taves has this. That'll be the first thought that I have there. The second thing I'd be looking for is in those initial roll-ups where that vote cleaves. Because if you see, for example, it's basically universal for, like, let's just imagine a scenario where Sonny's first off the ballot, and on second ballot, we see 95% is going to Taves. Well, that tells me that that's interesting, and maybe Taves has a pretty good shot. But if the Sonny vote is cut 50-50, then I don't think there's any outcome except for Danielle Smith becoming leader. So those are the things I'll be looking at for the first ballot.
Carter, anything to add to that? Those are some pretty good ones. So the top line number, where the vote split goes from who drops off on the first roll-up. Carter, what else are you looking for?
I'm always looking at attrition. Attrition is the most important thing that I think that will matter, right? So, and what attrition is when your ballot stops being counted. So if you just went in and you chose Leela here and she dropped off as Corey's scenario first, then you're no longer got a vote in the game. you're now changing the denominator. And so if you see 30% of the ballots cast for Leela here stop and they're no longer being counted, and that 30% continues all the way through, then it becomes much, much easier for that front runner, Danielle Smith, is how we think, who we think it's going to be. It becomes easier for her to win because the denominator drops. That's one of the reasons in 2011, when I was running Redford's campaign, Redford went and endorsed Doug Horner because we were mostly afraid of attrition. If Doug Horner's people did not cast their second ballot at all, obviously Gary Marr would have won. So we needed to endorse Doug Horner, tell everybody that we were, begging our people to mark Doug Horner as our second choice, not because we thought we were going to come in third, but because we were trying to get a little bit of reciprocal bias to work for us, so that they would actually.
We're the same.
Right.
Yeah. Well, like to illustrate here, so there's about 80,000 ballots cast. We know that. And 32,000 would be 40% of the 80,000. But by ballot 5, 32,000 might be 50% of the ballots that are still in the pot. It's not remotely inconceivable that 16,000 people over the course of that will not have like the second, third, or fourth choice that's necessary in order for that ballot to live and thrive in those later rounds.
Yeah. So okay, that's what you're watching for. Carter, do you have some news to break to us? Because it seems like you've broken some news to us on our WhatsApp group. I don't know if this is well sourced, but also like tell us.
Like when have we ever cared about well sourced?
This is coming from inside one of the campaigns. Ladies and gentlemen, we have breaking news. Breaking news, ladies and gentlemen. From inside one of the campaigns, they're saying, don't expect anything until at least 9 o'clock.
Okay.
So,
well,
Zain,
I'm undoing this button. I'm going to sit back a little bit here. I think we got a bit of a...
Right now, when's your thing going till, Zain?
I think I speak at 9:05. I got to be there by 8. So I'll be back. I'll be back.
Over under on us not getting a result before you.
Yeah, you're not getting a result before I come back. I think
this is going to be the best
your point,
night
Carter. But I think it's really interesting though, like taking a step back and fully examining what you said right off the top, Carter. The difficulty of counting hand-marked ballots on a preferential vote. This is kind of like the O'Toole scenario in some ways, isn't it? Do you remember that very late leadership that they had at the Conservative Party of Canada? Not this most recent one, but the one before where Aaron O'Toole was elected?
Well, and that's why you see these things normally move to computer, because the computer can do this all in an instant. When you're doing hand-filled out ballots, and you're doing them and you're counting them by hand. Imagine just for a second, Corey's 80 vote scenario. You're going to count 80,000 first ballot votes. And then there's going to be in one pile, 1,200 votes for the person who came in last. And then you're going to go through those 1,200 votes and then apportion them across, change the denominator, the total number of ballots cast, and change all the numbers for each of the candidates based on how many second choices there are.
Well, and so this is important because, Carter, one of the things that happens in the hand counting of preferential votes, which I've never seen on this scale, I've never been in the back room on this scale for that. Most of the organizations I've worked with have automated that particular process, but it becomes like, especially the longer it goes and the more tired people get, it becomes confusing. And people say, wait, hold on, was that pile supposed to be there or was that pile supposed to be there? And a scrutineer comes over and says, did I just hear they put it in the wrong pile? I want to see that all again. And all of a sudden, you've got like 3 or 4 minutes that get chewed up and you've really not moved the ball forward at all. It can be really, really tough, especially because like you're going to have piles upon piles upon piles and protocols around where they should be dealt with. And I don't know if you saw the pictures of the count room, but it's like, it looks like the Library of Congress in in All the President's Men from above, where there's just like table upon table upon table. And there's just going to be folks roaming between those tables saying, how are you doing? You got that count going? And that's, that means there's scrutineers roaming between tables. That means all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Carter, if you were on the inside of the party right now, would you be worried that you're having a delayed results? Is this just something we'll forget because it's all about the outcome? Like, I'm really curious about like what goes on in the head of a party right now. Like, are they panicking because they missed the media cycle at 6 p.m. and they couldn't introduce their new leader to supper hour by that time? Does it not matter? I'm kind of curious what the calculations from a PR brand strategy perspective are right now.
I think the number one thing is to make sure that you're looking like you're getting the right result, right? The result is everything. You're either getting the right result or and if you're not, then everything kind of blows up. So the right result is the number one thing. Keep in mind, I was a member of this party, or the precursor to this party, in 2011. It took us until 2 a.m. to get the right result, in no small part because one of the ballot boxes was actually out in a combine.
Oh God, I remember this.
Oh goodness, yeah.
Because it was harvest season, and they had to send
and they went
someone.
out. They went out with the ballots because they didn't want to leave the ballots alone.
You can't leave the ballots unprotected. You can't. I mean, that's just a given.
I
So
mean, that's
out
the
they
most
go.
Alberta story. It's incredible. It's really good.
And they find this person doing the harvest because it was October the 1st. And on October the 1st, people in Alberta are doing harvests. So that is, that's not going to happen in this particular situation. But in this particular situation, the count is just that much harder, right? It's not one person falling off the ballot. Because keep in mind, once you start getting into third and fourth ballots, now you've got people whose second choices are being counted for the first time, some people whose third choices are being counted, some people whose fourth choices are being counted. It just gets more complicated as you move through those ballots. It's actually pretty simple if we were just to sit down, the three of us, and do it for 100 people. We'd have it done in no time. But this is 80,000 people, and at minimum, because we don't actually, do we know how many people cast a ballot today, Corey?
I didn't see that, but hey, we'll do some quick Googling and give some apocryphal information about that. How's that sound?
Draw a conclusion from it based on no information at all.
Absolutely.
Because if we're not talented pundits, I don't know what we are. Right. So let's get it done.
Carter, talk to me about, before I leave here, Taves, talk to me about what his camp is thinking right now. If you are the camp that is banking on the roll-up, kind of like your camp was in 2011, if I'm not mistaken. What are the emotions, what are the feelings right now versus being a front-runner campaign?
Well, our emotions were fairly confident. We knew who'd voted. We knew who voted on the day of. But remember, you could buy a membership right up until the day, right? So that day, that campaign was actually pretty good for us because we were getting reports back, even from people who weren't our scrutineers, that we were seeing a whole bunch of women coming in, specifically women between 35 and 55, which I've argued for a long time is the most powerful demographic in Canadian politics. And they came in and bought memberships. And so because of that, we thought we were in good shape. We really didn't know until the end because we didn't get one round, then another round, then another round. When I did this with Mike DeYoung in his campaign, the one and another round every 10 minutes type of thing, you know, as soon as the first round's done, where you're going to wind up because you know exactly what type of percentage you're expecting from everybody. That's really the trick, is to figure out, are we going to get Leela's votes? Are we going to get, how does this roll up actually function for us? And if you don't have a game plan, it's going to be pretty tough to, at this point, you wouldn't even be winning. If you don't have a game plan, you're not going to win.
So I was just looking at Twitter here, and there's a couple of things going on that I will draw attention to. If the strategist decision desk here, one is that Catherine Krakowski was tweeting that multiple campaigns are telling her this is going to be closer than people suspected. So I don't know if that's coming out of the count room. I suspect that it will be a pretty leaky count room. So why the hell not? And the other thing is that we are going to get the ballots, if there's more than one, every 10 minutes once they start churning them out. So it could be a real hoot, real holler.
That's interesting. Okay, so you're saying that for whenever the first round triggers, it's 10 minutes after that. So if we go 5 rounds, we're looking at the hour, within the hour, we'll know.
Which is basically, that's the pretty normal thing that preferential ballots do. That every 10 minutes they get a little bit of a media hit at each one. It's the equivalent of the convention, where they used to have an hour or 2 hours between each ballot because everybody would have to recast their votes, right? Because in the convention, the delegates had the opportunity to be wooed by the other teams while they went and recast their ballots. Yeah. This, they give the 10 minutes just because they think it's more theatrical. They could do it all in one hit, but all the ballots will be counted before the full first result is released.
So maybe we'll get an opportunity to know before they tell, because Carter, one of the things that happened in the leadership you ran in 2011 is Redford won. It was close, but Redford won. And one about that before it was broadcast was one of the ways we found out about that before it was broadcast. Hey, Zain, do you want to ruffle that paper a little bit more?
I do. I'm just leaving for something way more important than this. I just wanted people to know that.
No, it's good.
There's
That's
something
excellent.
way more prestigious and important than what I'm doing here. And I'm just going to, while you continue that point, let me just rehearse one more time. Go ahead, Corey.
Well, the sheriffs came to and like stood outside of Allison Redford's room. And so it became pretty clear, like, you don't stand outside of the room of the loser unless you're having her whacked. And that's not how we do things in Alberta, despite what you may have heard.
Yeah, I mean, not technically. You know, it's a little bit more House of Cards than we'd like to know.
Yeah, there seems like there's a story there. Yeah. Okay, with that being said, I will leave, but let me tee you up on a few potential avenues of conversation.
Oh, good. Do you want me to take notes?
Listen. When I leave, I know you guys just turn into an awkward bunch and don't really know what to do with your hands or really know what to do. Yeah, exactly. Carter, if this is Taves, what did everyone get wrong? I want to talk about that. I think in retrospect, like how were we all collectively wrong? The pundit class, the media class, the political class, to put all the eggs in the Smith basket and then have Smith give the most presumptuous press conference I've ever heard from a leadership candidate. I want to talk about what the party needs to do in the coming days. And I mean that as the party, not necessarily Smith, what the party needs to do in the coming days. And let's talk about what either Smith or Taves need to do in the coming days, what you expect. So some crystal balling. Is there a press conference tomorrow morning? Is there, regardless of who wins, what does the media halo look like? How do they take advantage of any of that? Is any of it still real in a 2022 world? Or is it all mythology that's kind of been baked into the 90s and the 2000s of how we did politics? Chew on that. I'll be back. Like I said, I've got something very important, arguably more important than this podcast. And by the time I come back, I bet Corey will have no blazer on, probably no tie on, and will look significantly more haggard than Stephen does right now.
You know what? It's really upsetting. We are going to look fucking professional all night long. Because you know why? Because we're pros. We're not amateurs. This is a pro podcast. Did you see the quality of my microphone? This is a pro level quality microphone.
And you could learn something, Carter. You could learn something.
Yeah, I could.
You got a lot of growing up to do.
I'm just gonna go to my more important thing now. Okay, I'll see you guys later.
Okay.
Hey, did we line up anybody to help us?
I actually thought about it as he was leaving that we probably should have. So I'll work like kind of the Twitter thing as you say some dumb things. But
should we actually address the questions he left us with, or should we just?
I wasn't paying any attention.
I think one of them was, "What does the party do?" And I'm like,
okay,
whatever. But the other
one
one
is, party does after one of these things.
Oh, okay.
I can tell you. Do you want to actually talk about it?
Why don't you? Because you actually might know what you're talking about on this one.
Yeah. So I ran a leadership contest for a party. And there's two things that happen. One is everybody fucks off. Like everybody's done, they're so tired. They just sort of say, all right, it's on to the next thing. And the second is they have to brief the leader on kind of the party mechanic stuff. So there's a couple of things that are going to happen in the next couple of days, regardless of who is chosen as leader. One is that they're going to have a transition in the public service sense. And, that's something that we can go into some detail on. I had the quote unquote pleasure of doing that in 2019 as the transition between the NDP and the UCP government. But there's also a smaller transition that happens on the party side, where you go in and you have to understand kind of the party apparatus, and there's sometimes changes that need to be made, such as, do you need a new executive director? Do you need a new fundraising chair? Whatever those party positions are. And so it becomes like somebody's job to go through the checklist of the things I need from you in the next bit. And it happens on the party side and it happens on the government side. Now, on the party side, if you are a party in government, that's often kind of tasked to somebody on your team because you've got a lot to do. But, it's a lot of checklists. It's a lot of moving through things. And it's a lot of people just disappearing, saying, I'm tired. I'm done. Well,
I remember seeing that. I mean, Kelly Charlebois was the ED, and he stayed on, and in part because we asked him to stay on. There are so many things. Like, I think that people in Alberta especially forget that there's actually different things going on. You have a group of people who are the party, And that group of people who are the party are run by the executive director, the president of the party. And then we have.
Hey, bud, it's about to go live. They're already there. They're talking.
They're not talking.
They're on. They're on. You go to United.
You're lying. This is
I'm
where they come
not.
on to tell us that it's going to be another 2 hours. Where did you find this little piece of information?
Yeah, I've got like half an ear on the thing.
The video is live.
They're singing "O Canada" now.
It doesn't matter.
Do you think we should sing "O Canada"? We never do that at the start of a podcast.
You know why? We're not nationalists. That's why. And I don't know the new words. I can't remember what we're supposed to.
Jesus, what are you? All right. Well, where were we before I interrupted you with that breaking news?
Well, I mean, where I was saying that the party, the party people, the party faithful, it's hard to fill a party, and the party itself is different than the caucus. So the leader is technically the leader of both, the leader of the caucus, well, all three, because there's a government as well. And Danielle Smith doesn't come from this party, right? She's not been a part of this party. So learning about the party itself is going to be tricky. She's also not a part of this caucus. She literally not elected. You'll recall that when she was last leader of a party, she had some challenging moments, had a really difficult time with her caucus, and ultimately, I think, left with everybody else at the same, being left alone in a caucus that didn't want her. And then ultimately, she is also not a member of the government. She's not a cabinet minister. She has not been a part of Jason Kenney's group. And so she's those three things she's now the leader of, but she's not a part of any of those three. And that's going to be a big challenge for her as she moves forward.
Yeah, I think that's right. And by the way, Carter, if you were curious, you don't apparently need to know the new lyrics to "O Canada" because they sang the old ones.
Oh, that's great.
At
That's
the
great.
UCP convention. But there is going to be, one of the things I find really fascinating here is, you're right. Like, there's such a big learning curve if it's Danielle Smith. Not learning curve, that's not the right word. She's not an MLA. So, that caucus stuff is going to be new. She's never been in government. So that government stuff is going to be new. And while she's led a party before, she's never led a party quite like this before, right? The Wild Rose was a different creation than the UCP and didn't have the same tensions the UCP now has.
Well, you say that, but the tensions were why she had to leave. Keep in mind, she was pushed out of that leadership. She was not in a position of strength when she crossed the floor. If she was in a position of strength, A, half her caucus doesn't go. B, she doesn't have to leave. This was a position of weakness in 2015 when she crossed over to Jim Prentice, or the end of 2014. That wasn't a position of strength. So as a result, she's in a much, much different position. But I do think that the caucus is still broken for her. They're still not necessarily all one group. So she's still going to have to try and figure out what does this mean for her, right? What does this mean for her as a member, the leader of the caucus, the leader of the government, and the leader of the party.
Yeah.
Did we get results?
Yeah.
Yet?
One of the things.
No,
no, I don't think so. You know what? This is gonna be pretty crazy. I might still have my jacket on by the time Zain gets back. Zain's gonna get back and we'll be done.
Yeah.
If
I really wish I hadn't worn a thong.
Better talk about this now.
Oh,
I have
tight.
If Taves wins, we better talk about this now, because this might be totally negated in 10 minutes, right? Yeah. What would everybody have gotten wrong? Do that whole, if this failed, what was the reason it failed thing? If Taves wins, what's the reason Taves won?
We didn't give you enough credit when you said that Jason Kenney was stronger after the leadership. That's what everybody would have missed, including you, which is ironic, because you walked away from your own analysis pretty damn quickly. But this is what you said was, well, not hold on. Don't give me that shit. You're in the Danielle Smith camp too. And don't kind of pretend that you aren't.
Don't make me run the tape. Don't make me run the tape from last episode.
Well, sure, sweetheart. You were in both camps at the same fucking time. The same thing you did.
I wasn't going to lock it in. Wasn't going to lock it in.
You can't. Because you're afraid. Because you don't have what I have. And that's a level of stupidity just to predict. Just to jump out on the high wire. Right? That's what people are looking for you. But you just don't do it. So I think that they missed the overall strength of the party that was behind Jason. And Jason's party is still Jason's party. He was literally the only person who could put this all together. And he is handing it off to Danielle Smith or to Travis Taves virtually intact, even though it's gone through this nightmare. Sure, you've seen some Wild Rose independence growth, but you've not seen a new party in the center. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
By the way, I have Deirdre Mitchell McLean in the hall texting me right now. She said that there are more Smith fans there than anybody else, which is not really news. Deirdre, I need something more specific if you're listening.
If you're going to be our correspondent, Deirdre.
Yeah.
No, here's the thing. I think that's right. Like if Taves won, fundamentally, we've got to start with the leadership review that Jason Kenney won. And people forget that, right? He got 51.4% of the vote there. And what I said at the time and what you were referencing was the idea that maybe Taves would have gotten even more than that, because some of the people who were frustrated with Jason Kenney, you have to assume, would think, well, I'll turn the page to the finance minister and maybe it's okay. So if you think the existing membership, it was probably pretty friendly to Taves. And then the number of members that were sold, well, significant. I mean, I think it was at the end of the day, not even, it was comparable to what they got for the leadership review, right? So maybe if you're starting with the party and the other person sells more memberships than you, but there's a roll up, maybe you're actually not in the worst place ever. And of course, the other thing, the blindingly obvious, is he had all of the caucus support. Like Travis Taves to this day still has the majority of the caucus support.
Except for the traitors.
You think he's starting a list? Oh boy. If Taves wins, how much do you not want to be Nate Klubish, or the Minister of Service Alberta who flipped from the Taves campaign?
Yeah, there's a long list of names that I wouldn't want to be because normally what you do is you reach out, right? So you reach out to the other teams and you put some of their top people into cabinet because that's how you keep the party together.
Yeah.
But my sense is
breaking news here, Carter. We are not quite ready for the results is what they've just said from the.
Oh, so did you want to apologize? Was that an apology?
No, I want to take my jacket off is what
was that an apology? Because I expected that because you were all like, "Whoa, we've got stuff going on." No, you don't. No, you really don't. We now know that
Canada was sung. We had our O Canada conversation. It's just
85,000 ballots cast. So that's all we know for sure.
Well, that's pretty good though. It's more than I knew a minute ago.
Well, that leads me to believe that they're through the first ballot count.
Because they know how many ballots there are.
Yeah, that's what that leads me to believe.
That's fundamentally a good point.
Yeah, well, I know you're always shocked when I make just even a smidgen of a good point. So thank you for being there for me. You know what we did there that we wish we could do over. We rushed through those 2 points trying to get to this thing that you thought was actually going to be something. And now we've rushed through. Hey, so you have access to people who are watching it live, right? Mm-hmm. And they could ask us, this is weird for us, we don't like it, but they could ask us questions that we could then answer unless they're shitty questions.
Oh yeah, so, like we could do if there's questions on YouTube, why don't we throw to the people who are on the chat here and see how many things that we can knock off.
Do they have any questions?
Hey, listen, while that we're waiting for anything to come in here, one of the things that I think has been interesting is there's been a bit of a rumor about how Danielle Smith is going to approach her first couple of days if she wins. Yeah. And the rumor is that she's going to basically insist that she be sworn in as premier ASAP, like right away. Tuesday is what I think she might have even said as much. And if Tuesday is when she's going to be premier, that's obviously not enough time even to do like the RCMP vetting of potential cabinet ministers. So she would be premier with her existing cabinet as she started trying to figure things out. And one of the reasons apparently she's in such a burn to do this, if she wins tonight, is because I guess she's just pissed off with all of the announcement that Jason Kenney's been running out the door in the past couple of weeks. And like on the weekend, I think there was like a dozen news releases on Saturday. There were 16 or 17 yesterday. There were still announcements today. I mean, the guy's governing right to the last minute. That's for sure.
Well, and everybody's talking like this is the last minute. This isn't the last minute. He's still the premier until such time as she is sworn in. He continues to be the premier. There was, in fact, I think 1 or 2 days where I was actually chief of staff to Premier Ed Stelmach because I got put in as chief of staff before he'd actually left. And so that's not unheard of.
You should be putting on your resume you were chief of staff to 2 premiers. I just want you
I
to know
really
that.
should. I mean, you've got the whole, I was, communications for 2, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, see, it's true.
Yeah. Blah,
Well,
blah, blah. No one pays attention. They don't care.
But I said this on CBC earlier. I kind of want to recap it here. We got a bunch of questions here, but the frustration that Danielle Smith has with Jason Kenney governing to the last minute, I don't actually have a ton of sympathy for, because Jason Kenney is the one who won the election. He likes to remind us how it was this huge majority. He's not wrong in that he got an outright majority on a very clear, very robust platform. Did Albertans get it? Did they know what they were getting? I think that they in spirit thought they did, but they didn't go by the letter. But he had the mandate to do that. And also, as we talked about, he won his review. So there's kind of a good argument to be made that his last minute governing is way more legitimate and democratic than what Danielle Smith's first minute governing will be. An Alberta Sovereignty Act that nobody has voted for, an Alberta Sovereignty Act that, no Albertan has actually cast any kind of views on. And hey, listen, if that's the case, that Danielle Smith is frustrated by the illegitimacy of Jason Kenney, I think, to use a kind of famous Alberta phrase, but she might want to look in the mirror and say, what does she need to get legitimacy for governing?
I mean, really, with something as she needs an election. I mean, anything that's real, anything that's a policy directional change, she should be asking for an election. She can technically do whatever she wants. This is our system of government. She is elected leader of the party. She will be the premier. There is no question about that. But whether she's the, whether she's the legitimate person who can push these things through. I mentioned earlier on our CBC piece that if she pushes things through, she has a real risk of backlash, because people are, even once they're pushed through, and they are concerned primarily, and I think you made this point, they are made primarily with cost of living. They are primarily concerned about income, how they're going to get through this inflationary period and the shift away from oil and gas. The challenges that Russia and OPEC are bringing to the oil and gas market, where we're seeing significant shifting away towards renewables, in no small part because Russia and OPEC have just down and prices high. This is going to really push the way that Alberta is seen in the world as kind of our little petro state. So I think that things are still really shifty. And if she starts pushing people around, people are angry. And when they do, they elect new governments. And she'll be 6 months in by the time she gets to an election. That's what she's promising us. And that means she's no longer a new government.
So Lucy's got her football again, and there's some suggestion that we're expecting first results in a few minutes here. So we'll have to, very close to results, very close to getting results. So we're getting this. I'm glad we have this YouTube chat, because honest to God, otherwise we might just be talking over everybody knowing who the next premier is here.
Yeah.
But the problem with Danielle Smith having none of that mandate and taking such a veer from what Jason Kenney actually got a mandate for, on a fundamental level, and we used to talk about this in our consulting days, Canadians, Albertans as well, within Canadians context there, we're nuts for process. At the end of the day, if we can sit by a process, we'll begrudgingly accept results, even if we don't like the results. But it's pretty flawed when, if you're sitting here in Alberta, I can easily imagine a campaign that's along the lines of, angry black everywhere that says, give us back our voice, Danielle, or we want the vote, or you have no mandate. And people angrily kind of taking on the, what the fuck are you doing? You can't pull us out of CPP. You can't do this Sovereignty Act stuff. You can't create this police force. You can't. I never said you could. And I think Albertans would have a bit of a legitimate case. One of the things that Danielle might have a problem with then is that she will fail on process before she even fails on merits. If people think, Danielle, I would have even been willing to consider the Alberta Police Force, but you're not even giving us a chance to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if she undertakes something that big without a full costing and those types of issues, I mean, she's just going to be ripe to be ripped apart by the NDP as well. This is not an unheard of play that that the opposition, regardless of their brand position, could come in as the more fiscally responsible couple, the more fiscally responsible party. The Alberta Police Service is going to cost a small fortune, more than we're paying right now for the RCMP, that's for sure. But And on top of that, I mean, I'm watching the Surrey Police Service be a complete clusterfuck. There is no evidence that shifting to a police service at this particular time is viable. So I just think this is a real a tough nut to get through. Do you have any questions for us, or what do you think we
there's
should
tons
do?
of questions here. So
Do you want
the
to, are any
first
of them
one here. Well, that's in the eye of the beholder, Stephen.
These are our audience members. We don't have high expectations. So
does Notley win either way? Does it even matter if you're Rachel Notley?
No, Notley does not win either way. I mean, Notley may come out of this. Notley could lose either way. This is one of the challenges of this election. It's all about Calgary. We talked a lot about Janet Brown's poll that shows that Danielle is pushing away Calgary. If she takes the actions that she says she's going to take, she's going to push away Calgary even more. But Calgary does not necessarily mean that NDP. In 2008, Kevin Taft and Ed Stelmach did their very best to ensure no one voted for them. And Ed Stelmach still won. So what can happen is that the voter turnout could drop and Danielle Smith could simply win because the NDP still hasn't turned on enough people.
Yeah. Listen, one thing I got to do here is apparently my kids are watching because they're very excited that their dad is a YouTuber, right? Because this is the epitome of fame if you happen to be 8, 6, or 4.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I mean,
well, why don't you talk for a second to your kids?
I want to shout out my kids. I want to say,
yeah, just hang on a second. I gotta drop
go to bed. Stephen is swearing, and you don't want to hear all of the bad words that Stephen is saying.
I didn't even swear. Did I swear today?
I mean, you're going to. You're absolutely going to. They were about to get the results for the UCP leadership. Of course you're going to fucking swear. Of course you're going to swear, for God's sake. Don't be an asshole. You still there? That's to you and my kids. Oh, no, we lost Steve. Oh, did we lose Stephen? Okay, well, this is going to get really grim in a hurry here. How do you lose Stephen Carter and continue a show? I don't know. I mean, he is kind of the glue that bonds. Oh, good. He's coming back. I guess my language scared him away. Okay. What do we do? What do we do? Quick. People tell us what we got to do. He's still not here. My God. Okay. I'm going to run through some questions. And I'm going to do a bit of a lightning hour while Carter tries to get his act together here. Have the results been announced? No. Good question. They have not. When is Zain coming back? Don't know. Great question, though. Does Calgary Elbow get a by-election? I think it's going to be really hard for them to avoid giving Calgary Elbow a by-election if they're going to call a by-election in a rural area. This is part of one of the reasons why I think it seems likely that May 29th date just has a lot of pressures against it. And maybe we won't actually see, despite Danielle Smith's claims to the opposite, like a running out of the clock on this particular mandate. You can imagine people saying, you don't have a mandate, you don't have a mandate, you don't have a mandate. The cabinet getting a little bit squeamish, the caucus getting a little bit squeamish. And then Danielle Smith just saying, okay, well, let's get that mandate rather than risking losing a couple of different votes. Is Brian Jean everybody's second choice? What does it mean if they go several rounds? I don't think Brian Jean is everybody's second choice. I think Travis Taves is everybody's second choice. Because the thing about Travis Taves is he hasn't managed to antagonize, either rural or urban. Brian Jean is not the kind of guy who I think that the UCP stalwarts in downtown Calgary feel that fondly about. I mean, you remember all of the reporting that was coming out way back with him like threatening fist fights with some of his caucus colleagues. Hey, welcome back, Carter. Really good to see you.
Well, first
of all, turns out the one thing worse than the worst thing than doing a show with 2 people is 1. That's what I learned.
That was good. How was the monologue? Did it go well?
Well,
I mean, you've done speed. First of all, I was gone for like 3 minutes, and I've seen you go for like 8 minutes in a row on the pod. So I don't feel like this is a really big thing, but nonetheless, I'm back. I'm glad you missed me. I've moved some things around on my screen so I can see things better.
Oh, that's really good of you here.
I'm pretty excited. Have we got anything? What's the update? Do you want to ask another question? What do you want to do?
Yeah, I'll ask another question. I've got the thing open. It still seems to be paused here. One that I just saw that, kind of interested me is, where do you think, like Danielle Smith said this thing about she's a rural girl, right?
Yeah.
So she wants to vote in a rural or like run in a rural riding. Gonna throw
Yeah.
it to you, but I gotta point out something. Danielle Smith worked on 17th Avenue in Calgary for years, right?
Yeah.
I also don't think that like the exurb areas just south of Calgary really count. But if she says that there's a bunch of people who've told her they'd be willing to step aside, where do you think she's going to run? Do you think she's going to try to run in southern Alberta? What do you think's the plan here?
Well, I mean, the run would be in southern Alberta. I mean, I'm certainly hearing that that's where she's looking at. She does live in a very, very rural community of I believe it's called Okotoks. Okalooks. Anyways,
there's a lot of things. There's things to do in Okotoks, man. I need you to know that.
Oh, nice. Bravo.
Thank you.
Bravo.
That's a reference that
the 3 people on the stream got, but I got it, and I'm very impressed. But but it's not rural per se. And as you said, she does work has worked in Calgary for a long, long time. So she has roots in this city. But she wants to represent a rural riding. I think that's smart, because the rural ridings are the only ones that she can absolutely win. And it gets her out of running in Calgary Elbow, where there's a very real chance that she could lose in Calgary Elbow. So she's trying desperately to avoid that particular situation.
Yeah, well, I don't think she can win in Calgary Elbow. It's a riding that has been a bit of a bellwether for a long time. People point to that, and but it's not as though as Calgary Elbow goes, so goes the province. Calgary Elbow does tend to be a little bit more left wing than the province as a whole. Craig Cheffins ran there for the Liberals.
I was going to say, didn't you have a Liberal MLA there for a while?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, there was Greg Clark, who won even during a wave election for the NDP. It tends to be less about, I guess I would say, being like a bellwether and more about being like a deeply moderate riding. And so, I don't know. I mean, I don't actually think that it necessarily means you lose it. Sure, on the NDP's list of ridings, they win Elbow way before they hit government. That would be my guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Kathleen Smith is making fun of my white shirt. So at some point during this live stream, I am probably going to take all my clothes off.
That's not a solution.
My white shirt makes me look like
a
Mormon boy going door to door, according to
Kathleen. I was actually going to say you looked like a waiter who got stitched for the night, and it was for like a table of 20. And,
okay, Mr. Earls, you're really in a space where you're going to throw stones here? Like, you look like you're working in a bistro on 17th Avenue.
I would love to work at a bistro on 17th. It sounds really nice. Okay, what else we got here? What do you want to talk about? Well, I pull up a couple of questions here.
Well, I think what I want to talk about, I mean, Zain did ask us essentially, is the party going to do like a press release and things like that? Yeah, absolutely. They are going to, do the press conference with the new leader. They're going to do all those things. But ultimately, Danielle Smith's going to try and run away from the actual party apparatus as fast as possible and get into the government apparatus. And the reason for that is simple. The government apparatus has 100 times more resources, in no small part thanks to you, because you created a machine over there. And that efficient machine, once you get out the government strategies and structures, it is a very effective way of kind of moving things through.
Well, government is a funny thing. It's tough to sort of describe from the outside in a way that people can really appreciate just how much government is like. Well, first of all, it's like such a massive part of the economy. People don't really consider, that the public sector is 30, 40%, depending on where you are. And it's like an iceberg. Like, there's so much going on beneath the surface. There's such a size to it. And most of the time, the heft of government is not focused on the big, shiny political things. It's, we got jails to run, and we've got, consultations about elk to do, and all of this stuff that just needs to happen. But what you see every now and then with like really true believer types, especially when they get the reins of government, they start thinking things like, maybe I'll replace a bunch of the senior leadership. They start saying, I don't give a shit about elk. The jails, just as long as nobody breaks out of them. I want you to use the resources of this $55 billion organization for the things that I want. And, that can really shake things up in wild ways. And in a funny way, the governments that I have worked with have been a lot more restrained than I think a potential Danielle Smith government would be in terms of how much of that government heft you throw at your priority or your interests, I'll even say, and your
Yeah.
political interests.
I mean, the government, for the most part, every government that comes in with this big, we're going to take the government in a brand new direction. And the second you get there, you discover that going in a brand new direction is not that easy. Number one, there's a lot of decisions that have been made that the government actually, or the cabinet ministers, the top level of government, doesn't actually make. It's the bureaucracy. It's the group of people who are running the government. And those people are tasked with keeping the lights on, making sure that things happen. There's so many things that it's not like they come to the cabinet minister and say, should we issue the ACE checks this week? Should we move, those types of things aren't made at a cabinet level. Those are actions that are made from previous decisions.
It's ironic because should we actually issue the ACE checks did become a political scandal here in Alberta a couple of years ago. Remember when they moved them into another month?
Because they moved them 3 days to try and get them out of a cycle.
Which, by the way,
get it out of accounting.
Anybody who's got like an accounting background like that breaks all of these accrual rules of accounting. You're not doing it. It's not a cash basis. You're not running government books based on when checks flow. You're basing it when the expense gets matched to.
Well, if the check isn't cashed, it doesn't count. That's the base rule of this particular government, apparently.
Well,
yeah, I mean, it's just kind of crazy to me that this is. That Danielle's going to go in with this and she's going to have, like, if she does what she's saying she's going to do, she's going to be the most ideological government ever, certainly since the Aberhart days. And she is going to make the NDP look like they were centrists and just stayed in the middle of what the government told them to do, which, in fairness to Rachel Notley and, the governments that she ran, I think is true. I think that she was, for the most part, a very centrist type of governor. She kept things moving forward.
I think only by the standards of like a more ideological conservative party was Rachel Notley not a centrist. Like when you think about the activities she did, I think about even with all of the various different groups that were there. It's not like the UCP or the NDP were throwing money around. They gave zeros to literally everybody.
They got more zeros than the UCP got. They got more zeros than the UCP. And that's saying something, because the UCP came in saying they were going to do negatives. And they didn't get negatives. Not only did they not get negatives, they didn't get zeros, and they did ones and twos, and sometimes some more than that. And that's a big deal.
I got a great question here. It's, can we give a 30-second ranked ballots for dummies explainer? The people in my living room are confused and I suck at explaining it, apparently. Go. This is all you, man. You love ranked ballots.
This is me. Okay, so basically what happens with the ranked ballot is you get to first through seventh choice if there's 7 candidates. So you're given a ballot with everybody's name on it. You then choose your first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh choice. Now, more often than not, people don't choose all the way down to 7. So they will choose 1, 2, and 3, or 4. And why that's important, I'll get to in a second. But once you've submitted your choices, as long as your first ranked ballot choice is in the game, that ballot counts for your first choice. So let's say that you chose Rebecca Schultz as your first choice. Well, your first choice is then going to be in the game. It's going to count for as long as Rebecca Schultz is in the game. So Leela here, I'll pick on Todd Loewen. Todd Loewen, it turns out he's the first person who's going to be cut. So he gets cut early. All of Todd Loewen's second choice ballots now get reallocated to the other candidates. So in essence, all those second choices move to the other choices. So Rebecca Schultz will get a couple. Travis Taves will get a few. Danielle Smith will get a couple more. So all those choices then get reallocated based on the ranking, right? Then another person gets dropped off, and it's going to be Leela here. And again, we reallocate all of Leela here's second choices, including the Todd Loewen second choices that went to, and then they get reallocated. Now, what's happening as this goes along is that some ballots don't have more than the 3 choices. So once we start dropping 3 or 4 or 5 candidates, we start seeing ballot attrition. And that attrition is when there are ballots who had Todd Lowen, Leela here, and Rebecca Schultz, and they're no longer in the game, those ballots are then dropped. And that's what we start seeing when we talk about ballot attrition. So all it really is you pick your first choice. And when your first choice is no longer available, you go to your second choice. Your second choice is no longer available, you go to your third choice. And that proceeds all the way down until we have 2 candidates left and someone by mathematical certainty has to get more than 50% of the votes.
Yeah, like it can happen before 2 are left, but you need 50% of the vote, and it just keeps rolling up until you get to that particular point. Hey, listen, there was a couple of questions that I managed to pull in. The most important was, which Dave movie was Will Smith best in? And I think the answer is pretty obvious. It was Dave. But the second question here that I wanted to throw out there was, what's your advice to third-party organizations that want to engage with a new premier in this early period? It's a question I get all the time. And, you know, one of the things that I would say is people shouldn't overestimate their ability to do that. And they also shouldn't overestimate just because they're in the room that it's going to have the effect they want, because you don't know shit in your first days in government, and you are going to hear things and they are going to mean nothing to you until you hear them the 8th time and you have the context of a couple of months of governing behind you. So as much as people are super keen to engage with the new premier super early, and there's not value in that, because if you catch them right, maybe you can define their opinion on it. But know this, they've got their own agenda for the first few weeks, and it's unlikely to be the thing that you come to talk to them about. They're not necessarily going to be able to process it in addition to all of the other information they have going on. And so sometimes it makes a little bit of sense to wait a little bit, understand who the power brokers actually are in the government, understand the actual channels, do the work early, but know that like the new premier maybe isn't even your first target. Work your way through the organization, have those conversations, get ready for the big meeting, pick your time for the big meeting. It's just like you in your own life. If you have a million things going on, if you got like 8 projects due at work and someone comes and says, hey, I want to tell you about this really cool thing, you're going to tell them to go fuck themselves. You'll do it politely, but it's not likely that you're actually going to act on that particular thing unless it's about your work activity.
Yeah. Take a long game, right? Like the reality is that you're not going to be seeing things come from lobbyists until much later in the government's lifetime. The long game is going to be after May, to be honest, because if Danielle's coming in with this type of aggressive agenda, and frankly, even if Travis Taves wins, they're going to need to define themselves, and they're going to define themselves on whatever polling is telling them is the most important issue. So literally, if you want to walk in and have impact in this government, you best be walking in with a poll that says, if you choose this issue, X percentage in Calgary, because the entire battleground is going to be Calgary, and that's where everything is going to be centered. So we will, see how this all unfolds. But for now, I'd be sitting on my government lobbying until after May. And then making sure that you've got 2 really good packages, one for the government under Danielle Smith or Travis Taves, and another one for the government under Rachel Notley.
Well, look, I think you want to have information ready. So if they go seeking data on this, if somebody comes and says like let's just say you work for Synovus, right? You want to make sure that if they're going looking for data on Synovus, they know that no pun intended, that pipeline is open. You're able to connect with those people. Yeah, we got a brief from the people at Synovus. I'm able to pull this forward to you. You don't want to be too pushy about it. And you certainly don't want to assume that just because you got them in the first day, you got them best, because quite often the opposite is true. Like they just don't have the bandwidth to deal with those particular things at the moment. A couple of questions here. One of them was kind of thrown to me, but I think you could have some interesting thoughts on this here too. Can I explain a bit about how the new premier interacts with the public service in terms of transition in the first couple of days?
Oh,
yeah, I can.
Do you want to try that first and I'll come in second, or do you want me to do it first and then you clean it up?
Well, I mean, either could be an awful lot of fun. Why don't you go first? So the interesting thing here is Carter will know it from the politician coming in, and I will have the insight of like the bureaucracy talking to those people.
Well, we came in knowing that we were going to change the deputy minister of executive council. So we came in with an agenda, not that dissimilar from Danielle Smith, where the top senior leadership of the team is going to be changed. And when we came in, we said, oh, this is who we want as our deputy minister of executive council. And then at that point, it became much different, because now you have an executive director or Deputy Minister of Executive Council, who is new. You're also new. And so everything shifted. We shifted, much like Danielle, we shifted a lot of deputy ministers out of the government. I don't think that we were as aggressive as she was, but people. And it did kind of take us some time to recover from that, because the briefings that were set up were all set up by the previous deputy ministers. So now you've got a new deputy minister reading the briefing that was sent to you by the other guy, right? So the briefing notes aren't your own briefing notes, and you're trying to figure that all out. And understand what happens. You are getting a briefing from every deputy minister in government. Everybody is coming through and telling you what the priorities were and asking you what the priorities will be. And you don't necessarily know enough to start saying, well, here's what the priorities are going to be for Service Alberta. You may have enough where you can say, this is what the priorities are going to be for, other issues. But, like you may have an energy policy that you knew from the beginning. You have your Sovereignty Act. You have maybe, we looked at how we were doing our accounting. We had thoughts on all of those things. But then when you get your interactions with the deputy ministers, when you get your interactions with the senior civil servants, you get a reality check pretty quickly. And I think that's where you come in, Corey, because you were, and, we're pretty good at the reality check.
Yeah. So when you are getting ready for a new government, whether that's during a leadership contest or when it's during a general election or in the lead up to it, I cannot, overstate how much work goes into this from the public services side. You're looking at all of the policy announcements that everybody is doing. You're getting the teams to work up how you would actually implement those things. You're providing policy options. Maybe that's not workable, but maybe we can give you something somewhat similar. If we do your thing, here's the consequences. You're very gentle about how you present the consequences, because this is also your first impression. And you don't want people to think, well, these guys aren't going to work with me at all, right? Because actually the public service is keen to work with you. We are just, unfortunately, we know too much, right? One of the curses of the public sector is like everything becomes complicated because you understand much more like the texture and the detail and the background, and you have that long history going through. But what ultimately comes out of this giant process is binders for every eventuality. And it says so what you've got tonight is there's 2 sets of binders, or more. There's probably more, but here's the Smith binders. Here's the Taves binders, and they're by every department, and they've cross-referenced to everything they've said during the campaign that people are watching very closely from the Policy Coordination Office. And they're saying, here's how we would implement it. And if they've given direction on timelines, here's how we would meet your timelines. Here's why we can't meet them. Here's some other things we could do. And that very, let's turn your policy or your political policy into actual government policy stuff is then wed with a bunch of what we call machinery of government stuff that needs to occur. So here's what we need at 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. You got to be aware these deadlines are coming up. There's this thing we've got to do with the federal government here. You've got to go to this conference there. And then some of the stuff that they find most interesting, which is, how do we swear you in? What does it mean if I want to have polling done? Who do I pick up the phone and call if I want to have a public opinion poll done? Who does advertising? And basically all of that is provided in very detailed, very information dense briefings, which again, to my point, UCP is going live. Results are coming in. Results.
I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it at all. Kelly Kreiderman's tweeting it. What is she, some sort of journalist or something that we're supposed to, have respect for or something like that? Well, Kreiderman. She's only got 10,000 followers. I mean, Carter, anybody who doesn't have at least 10,000 followers, I don't even talk to.
Why don't you continue to just disparage journalists in Alberta, and I'll watch the results, and you do a bit of a
I just wanted to finish off with the transition. I think that you brought up a couple of things, which is, here are all the things you're supposed to do. You're coming in, you're thinking you've got a full slate. You own your own calendar. You're your own person. You are your own candidate. And the second you walk through the door, you are inundated with, here's a First Minister's Conference. And here's another thing that's going to happen. You have to go to the Grey Cup. These things all are going to happen over the course of the next 6 months, and you are expected at them. And that is really challenging to figure out where that's going to go. Now, let me just jump in here with I mentioned that Deirdre is on the floor giving us feedback. Her latest text to me was, the fuck. I don't know what it means, but I am on the edge of my chair trying to find out what's going on.
So Rick Orman's now taking the stage, at least on the stream, which may be somewhat delayed. And I guess we're going to see. I guess we're going to see real soon.
Well, I'm pretty excited. As you know, the first ballot tells us almost nothing, but nonetheless, we're gonna learn as much as we can from the first ballot. This will be interesting to see if my 43% that I've been telling everybody is like a biblical number. If you're under 43, you're probably not going to win if you're in first. If you're over 43, it's like nearly certain. This is where we get to find out if I am completely full of shit. By the way, Corey, you've also picked up my numbers and said that kind of stuff. So I'm dragging you down with me.
Yeah.
Do you remember when I came in with all those drinks, by the way? You remember I had all those glasses of drinks and I was like, I'm all set. I got to pee. So I'm hoping that this is going to happen.
Chief Returning Officer is.
Are they just going to do introductions and stuff like that? Or are they going to actually do something?
Well, they're talking about the procedures now, and I don't know if I care an awful lot about this. Why don't we merge the leadership streams? Are we able to do that? Hey, I'm going to try something really wild right now.
Oh my God. This could be amazing if this actually happens, ladies and gentlemen. Please stand by for the wizard that is known as Corey Hogan. He's got a studio back there. People don't even know, but he's got a studio with a soundboard attached to it. I had to do it one time, and it didn't go well. Did not go well. It was not our best show. By the way, if you're not a Patreon or patron on the Patreon, I think is how we're supposed to say it, make sure to visit patreon.com/thestrategists and sign up and become a person who gives us $6 so that you can see stuff that you can get for free, but this time you're paying for it, which is way better for us. Did you get it to work?
I have no idea.
Well, there you go. So things are really working our way. Yeah, I'm not getting any. Dear, our reporters on the floor have fallen. So we are flying blind. Corey, do you want to ask another question while we go through Rick Orman's? And how the fuck is Rick Orman still involved? How does that happen? He ran against Allison in 2011. And I thought we were done with him then.
I tell you what.
You gonna ask another question?
Yeah. I'm going to ask you this question. What alcohol should we be consuming to help soften the blow?
Well, that's an excellent question. I'm glad you came to me first. The only person who would have been worse to ask this question of is Zain. There are two non-drinkers on this podcast and Corey. So coming to me, obviously, I'm going to have the best. It is, in fact, Southern Comfort and Coke because it goes down easy and you're going to need lots of them. And you're also going to be up for a while. So make sure you're having your Southern Comfort and Coke. Don't fall into the trap of beer like I fell into the trap of water because you're going to need to pee a lot. So 3 ounces of Southern Comfort, 4 ounces of Coke. That's how you mix it in. That's what you need. Start drinking now.
The results are coming in. So the time has arrived, according to Rick Orman. There's an odd hush in the crowd. There's some excitement.
Do you want to do the play-by-play?
They have the results for the first ballot. No candidate received the majority of the votes.
Well, that was expected. Good.
So they will go to another ballot. And on the first ballot, Ahir came in last.
Oh.
So now.
Did they actually put the numbers up or did they just say that Ahir was dropped?
84,500 ballots. It's not up yet. And he's going to read the percentages for each candidate.
Oh, this is great.
Ahir, 1.65%. Jean, 10.99%.
What?
Lowen, 7.68%.
They're doing it alphabetically.
Sani, 2.11%.
Oh, God.
Schultz, 6.9%.
Ooh.
Smith, 41.31%.
Oh my God, my 43 number. I'm so excited.
Taves,
my nipples just got hard.
29.35% for Taves.
Oh, this is.
Ooh, boy.
This show.
Oh,
everybody
boy, that's
stand by. Call your friends, call your family, get them to join the live stream right now. Shit's getting real.
Oh,
Holy
boy.
smokes.
Yeah.
So we're going to
So now we
find
got
out.
10 minutes.
That's the number that if you're in the Taves camp, that's the number you wanted to see. Didn't really want to see is Schultz down at 6.9%. Her dropping off before Lowen is going to be problematic. So the next one, Sonny's going to be dropped for sure. Then Schultz is going to be dropped because there's not enough votes in the Ahir Sonny to roll up and lift someone like Schultz over Lowen. And their votes, those three women at the bottom, aren't going to be enough to lift Lowen over Jean or Jean over Taves. So this is between Taves and Smith. And now the question is, how does the roll up actually go? Does Todd Lowen's vote move to Danielle Smith or does it move to Travis Taves? And it may actually be 4 ballots. This could be fascinating because I've been so wrong. So wrong.
Well, look, I'll tell you this. This is your worst nightmare because this is the Smith number just below the number that you've been generally said is required here. A couple of so Taves came in stronger relative to Smith on the first ballot, I think, than most people would have expected.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'll tell you, Schultz, Sonny, and Ahir coming in combined at only about 10.5%. That only gets, like, if they all went to Taves, that gets them to 40%. And to your point, there are going to be people who just drop off and say, because lest we forget, like, Taves is a bit of a social conservative. That's not naturally a fit for some of those voters there. The real question for me becomes the Jean voters. Where do they go? And where do the Lowen voters go? But boy, I don't know. I mean, looking at these numbers right now, it's hard to imagine Smith doesn't win, but certainly it looks a lot closer than I think we would have anticipated just based on some of the commentary and back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, this is really testing my 43, and it's testing it because in a normal race, you don't see someone move their votes over. But we've talked about how Brian Jean's voters are a real wild card. And I think that we can actually lump in Lowen into that. Lowen has done better than I've expected. I expected Lowen to be down kind of where Schultz was and Schultz to be up in the 10% range. By having Lowen kind of in the middle there, Lowen could go to Danielle Smith. There was a number of times when Todd Lowen was actively campaigning with Danielle. And that might just be enough with attrition and that vote to get Danielle to 50% before she has to get to the Brian Jean votes.
Well, look, I think that Jean plus Lowen plus Smith, even if I think Jean in particular, it's a little bit of a question whether that's where he would want his votes to go. That being 58%, 59%, hard to imagine that Taves peels enough off to actually win this thing. But what comes out of this could be very fascinating because it's not impossible at this point that Smith comes in not with some deep swagger. Now, listen, a win's a win and you're going to do it, but you're going to walk in having barely won a majority of the voters, potentially. Like, let's play this scenario out here. And you didn't get any of the caucus, really, except for a couple of people. I think that's going to play some interesting that's going to lead to some interesting dynamics in the UCP caucus. And it might end up being a bit of a break on some of the ambitions that Danielle Smith had. Like her choice becomes either govern like she bought it, which fair enough, right? Or don't and try to keep your caucus a little bit calmer. But this is in some ways, like, I don't want to overstate it. Like, I think 51-49 would be sort of the worst for Danielle Smith. And she doesn't seem to be tracking that way right now. But, this is probably not what she was hoping for based on what we're seeing right now.
No, I mean, I think that you'd want to be over 45 to really just feel really comfortable. But where she is still a pretty good spot and certainly winnable. Certainly. Yeah, I think this is a really interesting result. I still think that a really tough spot because if Travis somehow does pull this off, there will not be a bigger division in politics.
Oh my God. If he pulled, like, let's say, what's his path, right? It's grabbing all of that other vote that we just talked about in terms of the Ahir, the Sani, and the Schultz vote. And then it's also basically grabbing all of the Jean vote. So I don't actually think that's going to happen. Maybe I'll be surprised, but it doesn't seem like it's likely, just given how strong Jean and Lowen are relative to the others.
The two that we really have to look at, because Jean and Lowen are the ones that tracked, their supporters certainly tracked, and even Taves, everybody was going after that conservative vote all the way through. We talked about it on the podcast a couple of times that we were seeing people track off and try and get those conservative votes, because those seem to be the ones that the memberships were sold into. There was a lot of people in this race that by the time the memberships closed, they really were focused on raising the money and getting the signatures, and they didn't sell those memberships. Those memberships were sold by Danielle Smith, and I think that those are the big ones.
It's nothing really worse than losing only by a little too. Like there'll be a lot more agony, like obviously we've been talking about from the front runner wants to win big so that they have this commanding performance. But on the flip side, if you lose small, one of the challenges is the first thing people want to do is almost sort of rerun the fight. This happens in every election, right? The blowouts don't hurt as much as the close ones. And the close ones, it's like, well, what do we do now? We got to get ready for the next election. And we're going to keep this team together and we're going to campaign. And that same psychology in a close general election also happens in a close leadership election. Like, oh, it's not your time this time, but we got to stay together. And the minute you have that kind of conversation, you've got the seeds of your next leadership rift and your next rupture within your party. So again, look, Smith might win this with a pretty significant portion of the vote, but because of the way things roll up, she's not going to win with 60%. She's going to win with barely over 50%, but she may win with barely over 50% sooner than we were otherwise considering.
The question is, do you win on the 5th or the 4th? And if you win on the 4th, then you get to assume the 5th, right? We would have picked up all of Brian's, it would have been 60-40, right? If it's 51, like, do you know what I mean? Like if Todd Lowen just gets you over 51%, you get to assume that you had all of Brian Jean's vote, right? It's 60-40. Everybody's going to march with me. Here's my question. Does anybody walk out after this? Like we've already seen Richard Grotfried say, I'm walking the plank, I'm out of here. Does Travis Taves stay in a Danielle Smith government past May the 1st or May the 30th when the election's held? Or does he give an indication that he's done in politics?
Well, that depends. And ironically, if he still has leadership ambitions, I think he says he's done. And if he doesn't, I think he sticks around. Now, that might be counterintuitive, but the reason is you don't want to go down with the ship. You want to be able to have a little bit of distance from it. And if Danielle Smith does end up being this deeply controversial candidate that Albertans don't, jump onto, you want to be able to say, I wasn't there, right? But you want to be able to say it in a way that doesn't look like you're disloyal to the party. So you almost make it like, well, I gave it a good run. I'm going to go back to my ranch. It really is my first love. I owe this time to my family. I'm going to reconnect with my church. All of the things that I think you would expect to see a candidate who just fucks off to say, frankly.
Yeah, and, I would see him leave, and I would see Brian Jean leave. There's no love lost in those groups. Todd Lowen will certainly stick around. The interesting thing is what happens with Schultz, Sani, and Ahir. There's no mandate for them to say. There's no mandate for them to say, we are part. They are diametrically opposed to what Danielle Smith is going to do. And in my mind, them staying just is more a reflection of their own weakness than it is a reflection of Danielle Smith's strengths. This is not the party they campaigned for, and it will be a different party than the one that they wanted to create. So my thinking is, let it, those three should be as likely to leave as Brian Jean and Travis Taves.
Yeah. So a question here that I think is worth unpacking, because it's sort of a follow-on to something that I just said here, which is, how does Smith winning with 51% on the first ballot differ from Smith winning with 51% on the 5th or 6th ballot? And, the difference is this: if you win on the first ballot, you win on the first ballot. You've got the majority of support. Everyone can see that. There's no ambiguity about that. But the 5th or the 6th, say you get 51% there, nobody knows how those other ballots would have potentially rolled up. And they can start saying like, oh boy, like maybe if she had only gotten 49 on that, maybe Taves could have won. Maybe she only won by 2%. Maybe this was the closest race to ever. Look how many ballots it went. And the psychology is just materially different. Because what we do know now, after the first ballot, if we know nothing else, is that 6 in 10 UCP supporters did not have Danielle Smith as the first choice.
Yeah.
Now that's not lethal, but when you contrast that to Pierre Poilievre's overwhelming performance, what, 68%, I think,
Yeah.
right? That's, that's not looking as impressive. And I actually think that Smith will be compared to Poilievre with these percents as well.
Well, I mean, it will, yeah, she will be. And if she'll also be compared to O'Toole, and she'll also be compared to Andrew, how quickly we forget you, Andrew. Scheer, they're sneaking
new
over
results
51.
coming in here.
Oh,
yeah.
Hold on, I'm all excited. Do we actually have reporting from our
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? It's not going to matter.
11.
Nothing's going to shift. She had 1.6% of the vote. How do you reallocate it? Who cares? It's not. It doesn't matter.
Oh, interesting.
What?
Not that interesting.
No, there's nothing.
Well, Smith just grew from 41.3 to 41.4. It was
wow,
very modest changes.
Yeah, market improvement. Sonny had a pretty big jump. Schultz moved up a bit, but the point is, nothing could move because there was nothing to allocate. Sonny's now out. Schultz. I mean, theoretically, if Sonny's votes go to Schultz, then she could conceively get over Todd Lowen. And it is more likely that Sonny.
I actually think that's more likely.
Yeah.
I think that it's likely that Lowen, or the next one off the ballot, will be Lowen.
No, but well, in that case, it still probably won't be enough to get Danielle there, but it would be pretty close, and Schultz might still get her there just through attrition. So we'll get to see as this all, we may see an attrition drop off instead of something else. This is going to be fascinating situation here as it drops. I'm still not writing Taves off. I think that it could happen, but it's not a great situation for Taves.
Well, look, I mean, the Lowen vote will be the next big indicator here. So, that's not even true. The Schultz vote coming off, that will be the next big indicator.
Yeah, I mean,
when we end up,
we'll know pretty much everything when Schultz goes.
Well,
because like I said before,
or most of it goes to Taves.
Yeah,
he's still in this. If not, he's out. But then the next gate Taves has to go through is when Lowen goes off, what percent of Lowen's vote does he get? And if he can get, half of it, well, then he's still in this thing. But if not, I think it's basically over. So he's got a couple of gates ahead of himself. His path is super narrow if he's going to pull this one off.
I mean, he's got to pull together everybody. And I guess that's the primary difference between when we were in our runoff where it was just the three of us. It was much easier to get everybody to vote for Allison because it was just a choice of Allison or Gary. This is, it's much harder to get Taves into this, but we could see something shift dramatically when Schultz drops off, either in a couple of rounds or around after this.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like we were just saying, and then I immediately forgot, but odds are good Schultz is ahead of Lowen. And so Lowen will be that first indicator. And if Lowen, like that, that could be the game. We could understand pretty quickly.
We could understand very, very quickly. If Lowen goes 50-50, then Danielle's going to win. Right.
Yeah.
And that could or should happen because Lowen was campaigning so much with, that would be very high expectations. On the other end, if he went significantly to Danielle Smith, then I think that we would see. If he went significantly to Travis Taves, then there would be an indication that there is, in fact, in anybody but Smith movement in the quote unquote United Conservative Party.
Yeah. So there's a question here: if Smith wins, will she focus on nominations and any candidates? But that way, Smith has said that she would revisit some of these nominations, right? And she has also said that she wants a spring election. she might not actually get the choice of either. She is assuming that she's entirely in control of her destiny on that particular front, but it won't be easy to reopen those nomination contests. It'll require some dealing with party mechanisms that are pretty well established. Although I guess the leader's signature has always been considered kind of like that final gate. I'd need to look at the UCP bylaws to see if that's kind of already done once they become a candidate.
Yeah, I suspect that they're going to that will be, the bylaws dictate that the leader should respect the local nomination process. But there's many ways to eliminate a candidate without necessarily resorting to not signing their papers. So
Well, you could ask for their resignation as a starting point.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, the other question that's really kind of out here is, what next if you are Schultz and you're in fourth place? Like, does this sort of position you to be actually a more prominent player, especially given that she was not very quick to stand up against Danielle Smith? Could she be one of those rising ministers all of a sudden?
I think if I were Danielle Smith, or if I were Rebecca Schultz, I'd be getting my ass out of there. The chances of her having a meaningful position in cabinet, I think, aren't great. Unless you've already had some sort of talk with Danielle Smith where this is going to be given something, or you've been promised something, I don't think that this is actually going to be something that she can count on, right? So this is a real for the Sonnies, the Schultzes, and the Ahirs. Should they be in this party, given what the members are telling them today?
Well, and that's going to be a big question people are asking themselves here. Is this the party for them? One of the things that's happened an awful lot over the course of the leadership race, and I think even it's fair to say the years before, is there's been an awful lot of kind of like threats, almost saber rattling. Like, I don't think I can stay with these people. I might need to leave. Sometimes that manifested in people actually leaving or being kicked out, but mostly it resulted in people not. And, these letters of 18 people signing their displeasure just resulted in none of the drama publicly that was sort of promised. You never had the big floor crossings. What do you think?
Well,
are we going to get a big floor crossing here, or do you think this is more of the same? It's, all bark, no bite.
I'll tell you what, I'd like to see a floor crossing. I'd like to see MLAs that stood for something instead of an MLA that stands behind someone who's proposing the Sovereignty Act, the curriculum changes, the negative, the health changes that she's going to bring in. I would much rather see MLAs with backbone saying, this is not the party that I thought that I joined, than MLAs that simply just follow just to follow. But what I fear is that it's going to be the Richard Gottfried style of backbone, where you slink out the back door with your parachute instead of running and trying to storm the front of the plane or creating your own thing. What we covered last time podcast, it takes 3 MLAs to form a party. Are there 3 MLAs in this group of 50 odd MLAs?
We've got the third ballot coming in now, Stephen.
Oh no, I can't do it. I can't do. Okay, bring it on. Ballot. I'm excited beyond you.
No candidate has received a majority, so we're going to 4.
This is so much.
Todd Lowen is out.
Todd Lowen is out. Schultz gets all of Sonny's vote.
Yeah,
that's exciting. That is exciting. I mean, that just shows that, in when I did this in British Columbia, the eventual Andrew Wilkinson picked up a lot of votes and moved from 4th place to actual victory. So these preferential ballots can be very interesting if everybody starts off in the 20s.
Hey, Stephen.
What?
He just screwed up the numbers. He said Lowen, but he meant Taves. But here we go.
Okay.
Yeah. So Smith only climbed to 41.7% from 41.4%. which is not that surprising given
who
whose
dropped
ballots
and
were
how
being
much she had.
redistributed.
Yeah.
But he just said Taves dropped off the ballot.
That's a little bit Freudian.
Oh, he's going to
Yeah,
do
I
it
mean,
again. I don't want to do it again. Here's what's happened here. I'm going to mute these people. Oh,
Well, I'm
God, they
looking
took
at the
down the
screen.
numbers. They took
Yeah,
them
I've
down.
got it's 41.7 for Danielle, 30.4 for Taves, 12.1 for Jean, 8.0 for Schultz, who she obviously picked up the majority of Sonny's votes, and then 7.8 for Lowen. So Lowen is now dropped, and his results are probably going to make some impact depending on how many people had chosen second ballots off of him. It doesn't appear that we're seeing a lot of second ballot choices. Pretty small numbers of votes from shift, from ballot to ballot. So if Lowen's people chose Danielle, she could very easily get over 45. If they did not, then, maybe we see Taves drop or grow a bit, but it looks like mostly attrition is slowly moving Danielle towards the victory.
Well, we're going to see. It's another 10 minutes, and then Orman will come up and maybe tell us the wrong thing again. It'll be a hoot and a holler. But, a couple of questions that people have thrown out here that I think we can chew on in the meantime. One of them I can't wait to rant about. But let's start with this one here. Could this be a Pyrrhic victory? This is me adding the Pyrrhic victory part. Could Danielle Smith
I
end
recognize
up
the Pyrrhic victory language being added.
Could Danielle Smith end up being Canada's Liz Truss? The UK Prime Minister who's been there less than a month tomorrow, that people are already saying she should resign and let somebody else be leader. How would we rate in general Britain's new PM's strategic prowess? I think low is what we would both say.
I'd say nearly zero. Because both decisions that she made were really stupid. So the first decision to actually roll back the taxes and place Britain on economic uncertainty was really dumb. And then the decision to move back, also stupid. My recommendation would be choose the right course of action the first time.
Okay,
that to me is smarter.
Maybe missing the plot for tonight's episode though. Could Danielle Smith be the new Liz Truss? Could this be a situation where she comes in with such extreme views and people just immediately bolt?
That's just wishful thinking. In part, I think because the 30-odd MLAs that were supporting Travis Taves share one backbone amongst them. So if those 30 MLAs actually chose to say, you know what, this is not what this party was supposed to represent, then it could go very badly. But I don't think that even 4 of those MLAs would stand against in a new opportunity or in a, in an openly public or open. That's what's taking Liz Truss down. Maybe people start putting the knife into Danielle's back, but I think that Danielle's learned a lot from her 2014-15 when the Wild Rose put the knife in her back the first time. So Smith is definitely still sitting in a pretty good spot, but it's going to be fascinating to see how Todd Lowen's votes actually shift, because Todd Lowen's going to be.
Yeah, well, so here's the thing. I think the odds of anybody being any places Liz Truss are really low at kind of the subnational level. One of the reasons why Liz Truss immediately imploded was she did these things and the markets freaked out, right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it looked like there was this massive crisis with pensions in the United Kingdom. And in general, there was just like a plummeting of the pound and a seizing up of markets. And that's not going to happen because of something that happens in Alberta. Really, it's not, because we're just part of a bigger, national context here. And so I just don't think Albertans are going to have that oh fuck moment that the British did with their economy. It's going to be slow burn. It's going to be things like a constitutional crisis over months, as we go from question of will Zain's mother-in-law sign the thing to will it stand up in court to will this mean anything at all to does this just created a new angry right-wing brigade where everybody is now mad because the courts have knocked down the Alberta Sovereignty Act. And that's the kind of crisis I think you can expect with Danielle Smith, rather than kind of the Liz Truss, your entire economy is fucked overnight, which is what she ended up with there. I mean, it takes kind of like real power and no safety net in order to screw up as bad as Liz Truss did. And the British Parliament is supreme in a way that any Canadian Parliament is not. And also, it's their economy. It's everything. So then the next question, Carter, and the one I want to spend a little time on here. Does this result mean anything for the Alberta Party if moderates don't have a home?
Oh my God. Why do they do this to me?
We like to see what you do. We're going to disagree on this. I can already tell.
There is a better chance of a new party forming that no one has ever heard of. That could be 2 to 3, 4 MLAs, and them winning government than the Alberta Party getting anything close to an uptick out of this result.
I was wrong. We 100% agree. I couldn't agree more.
There is no, because the Alberta Party hasn't done it. And we are, and you know what convinced me of this, young Corey? What convinced me of this was the conversation we were having about the CAQ and political brands. Mm-hmm. And I think that the Alberta Party brand is now in the same place. The Alberta Party brand is in the same place that the Alberta Liberal brand is, the one that you used to, be a part of, before you tanked it. And this is, and arguably I may have had a hand in tanking the Alberta Party. But anyways, I think that this is a real, the Alberta Party needs to go away, and into its place needs to come something new, because we are looking for those new moments, those new ideas, and those new things. I really do think that the path forward is something more like, in a perfect world, 6 to 8 MLAs who look at Danielle Smith and say, I don't want this, and I'd rather go down fighting than just simply strapping a parachute and doing the Richard Gottfried, I'm afraid of my own shadow, escape out the back door.
Yeah. So it turned out we agreed. I think that the Alberta Party as a vehicle is unlikely to catch on simply because of their experience with previous leaders. If you were a caucus member and they were even floating the idea of you being leader, would that be that appealing to you after what happened to Greg Clark? I just think that it has too much baggage, and there's probably just not enough upside. Like, what's the upside? Like, what do you get with the Alberta Party? I think you're much better off creating your own thing without any of that baggage and with much more authority to determine the future of it. Like, you're not going to fight with a board of governors or a board of directors about how the thing should be run. Like, you don't need to deal with that if you get 3 or 4 MLAs and you can kind of pull them together.
Yeah, I mean, what do you mean, Ope? What do you mean, Ope?
Oh, there's results. There's results coming in.
Are there results coming in? This is very exciting. I mean, this is going to tell us, I think, everything we need to know.
Danielle Smith just got to 46. She's got this. She's
well,
I think.
I haven't seen that though. So you're making things up now. You're just making up numbers.
So here's the results. Smith 46.2, Taves 31.9, Jean 13.5, Schultz 8.4.
I mean, everything has to flow and there can't be any attrition. So Schultz will probably move 100% towards Taves, but there will be some attrition. So I'm thinking that attrition. The next one, she jumps to 48. And then with Jean, she'll jump over just through attrition, boy. I suspect.
I mean, it's going to come down to Jean's second choice voters under that scenario, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's still, but attrition still, right? Like, I think attrition is playing more of a role in this, because, I mean, I haven't seen the actual numbers. We'll have to get a spreadsheet out and do numbers because we're nerds, but I want to be able to figure out, was it attrition or was it movement? And because if it's attrition, that's a different type of victory too. If it's the stomach voting for other people, I don't like this party enough to make 2 choices, 3 choices, 4 choices on my ballot. I don't like this. It's also telling us something about where the voters' minds are. How many of these members, as their leadership candidates are falling off, how many of them are going to stick with Danielle Smith? We've been talking about, do the MLAs have the backbone? Do the members? I mean, the best thing when you're a member is you can just walk away. You don't have to vote. You don't have to do any more investment of your time. You're just going to be gone. By the way, I think that you've opened, we both opened 2 buttons on our shirt, one more, and we're going to be auditioning for Naked News on YouTube. It's going to be quite spectacular.
Okay, so here's the
Yeah.
thing. I'm looking at these numbers, and I think that there's been a ton of atrophy between rounds here, and I think we're going to see a ton more. But if
Yeah.
most of the Schultz vote goes to Taves and very little goes to Smith, it's not inconceivable to me we're at a like Smith 47, Taves 40-ish situation with well, I guess it's got to be less than that for one of them because you've got Gene at 13.5. It's not inconceivable to me that we all of a sudden have something where it comes down to if 2-1 Gene's voters go to Taves, Taves wins this thing. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough because the thing that you're not factoring in is, I mean, it's still going to be tough just to avoid attrition at this stage. There was one election, and I think it was the one where O'Toole beat the crazy man. Maybe it was Scheer who beat the crazy man, who can tell, but it was 51-49. And I think we're heading towards a 52-48. But I do think at this stage, I'm willing to go out on a limb, and mostly because you and I continue to record. And I know that we want to get over the 2-hour mark on this podcast because this is some of our best
longest
work.
episode. It won't be our longest episode ever. People are
What was
wondering.
our longest episode?
Oh, it goes back to the original. But listen, Dan Arnold, our good friend Dan Arnold, has been crunching these numbers in real time. Smith got 52% of Lowen's vote, lower than I would have thought. 17% went to Gene, 15% to Taves, 3% to Schultz, and the rest not marked. So I don't know. If you're only getting 50% of Lowen's vote, if you're Smith, what percent of Gene's vote are you getting? I'm going to throw you back to this question. I might be eating my words about this being over for
Ladies
Taves.
and gentlemen, please stay tuned to the Strategist Live. This could go all night. This is very exciting.
I do think odds are still good with Smith.
I'm going to undo the third button. I'm going to undo the third button. This is for you, Kathleen. I'm not going to do it. It makes me uncomfortable.
I don't want to do it.
I'm uncomfortable.
I need an adult. Yeah. I need an adult.
Where the fuck is Zain? Isn't he back yet? Didn't he say he'd be back?
Well, yeah. No, he said 9:15, and that means 9:45 if we're lucky. Anybody who's had to, wait for us to get our live streams going on a Sunday or Thursday night will know Zain's not.
Sometimes it's been me, in fairness.
Yeah.
One time.
I just think Gene getting 2/3 or Taves getting 2/3 of Gene's vote, not impossible. So
I expected more. We were talking about what happens if it's only 50-50 with Lowen's vote, and it really was about 50%. Now, again, this is the this is the attrition rate.
And you have
we
to
are really getting down there.
That the Lowen people who went to Gene are going to prefer Smith just based on how the second choices all broken.
But they might drop. They might drop completely. Like they may have only said, "I'm moving to Gene."
Yeah, we've
right.
Got
like
crazy.
So what is it? It's 60, 69,
way, Carter,
74.
We got a comment here that somebody is one button away from unsubscribing. So please try to keep it together. Please try to keep it together there.
I'm going to do one more up. If we do one more up, will you become a $10, $10 sponsor? By the way, we got a number of patrons to this week going in at the $20 level. The $20 level gives you almost nothing except the knowledge that we are taking more of your money. So thank you for giving us the $20. That's been very exciting for us. Corey and I were hoping to have a vacation from our strategy, from our
more results in for the
Patreon.
fifth ballot here.
Oh,
there is nobody has won on the fifth ballot.
Yes.
No candidate.
Going to 6, baby.
Going to another ballot.
This is exciting.
Gene is out.
This is exciting. Where's I'm how right were we? Very right. Very right.
Didn't you say 5 ballots?
Shut up.
Here's the percentages here.
Yeah.
14.83% for Gene. Taves.
Hey, can I just say it? Dan Arnold, if you're still
Smith
listening,
is right there.
Dan Arnold.
47.7% for Smith. Holy cow.
Oh, this is fun. Who's not having a good time?
So
who's not having a
this
good time?
is close. This is wild
Hey, Dan,
close.
Dan Arnold, if you're still listening, text Corey and I your email address. We'll send you a link to the Riverside. We really are looking for someone intelligent to join us with some
I've got Dan's email address. Dan, do you want to
Send
join us?
Send Dan. Dan is very popular on the podcast.
We all
For those
like
who
Dan.
don't know,
We all
Dan is like
Dan.
one of the smartest people we know.
How do I invite somebody? It's all beyond
just send
me at
them
this
the
point.
link and then they just come in.
Okay, but
just send them the link.
Listen, invite people.
Send
Here's
them the
what we
link,
do.
Corey.
Okay.
Just send them the link.
Hold on. God, my God. Okay. Well, say something while I get my email going here.
Well, I'm like,
you know, we're also
the
assuming
10-point
Dan is
gap.
going to drop everything he's doing and jump on.
Of course he is. What he's doing except crunching numbers. I mean he's
yeah, but
as big.
You're barely wearing a shirt right now, and you're on Zoom. You're on YouTube here. What do you think that
Dan is in bed wearing a buttoned-up shirt? Dan.
Oh my God! God help us.
We know Dan. Tell me we don't know Dan. Look at this. This is getting exciting.
Like I think this is crazy. So this is exciting. We got Smith at 47.7. That is super close. It's going to be tough to imagine her not getting enough of Jean's vote on that one there. And then you got Taves at 37.43. There. I don't know, man. Like
instead of looking at the percentages. Instead of looking at the percentages, let's look at the raw numbers, right?
Okay.
So the raw numbers, there's 12,000 ballots to be allocated. If you assume right off the top that 1,000 of those haven't chosen a second, then you got 11,000 to allocate. And you've got basically to give Taves 10,000 and
hey,
Smith can't get more than 750.
I just want you to know Smith winning with 51.4% of the vote is on the table.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Did your audio just cut out? Oh no, now he's swearing and he's got his fingers up here. So what sort of victory speech can we expect with numbers like 56%? I think it's your victory speech. I think you maybe have a line at the start that says something about like, oh, it was a hard fought race. And I really want to thank all of the other candidates who ran. But yeah, we did it. And it's a sign that Albertans are keen for, I know you'll broaden it. So it's about Albertans and not just the UCP, but they are looking for somebody to stand up to Ottawa and all of that good garbage. I think that's most likely to happen here. So not only did we not get Dan, we lost Stephen Carter. It feels like we're moving the wrong direction on that one, but maybe the right direction. It's hard to say. Hard to say what I prefer at this point. After being on with Stephen for 2 hours, it's sometimes not such a bad situation to get to not have him here. So why am I still thinking Smith has a chance? She got less than 43%. This was a question from a little back. Because ultimately the Jean vote is pretty right wing. And there were some differences that Jean tried to define between himself and Smith, particularly later in the race. Is that a signal that was picked up strongly enough by his supporters? Like we're at 39,000 votes to 30,000 to 12,000. And it doesn't seem impossible to me or that Taves wins, but it seems more probable that Smith will pick up enough of that Jean vote. Hey, Carter, you're back. Welcome back.
Sorry, I forget that I have static electricity everywhere. I'm electric is actually how it works. And my microphone craps out sometimes. It's been working much better.
Stephen got caught doing a tubing. That's a horrifying thought. By that I mean got caught giving legal analysis that he was not qualified to give. I think that's
exactly
what's
that's the worst.
Yeah.
So how long do you think we're gonna have to wait? Because they're cutting down the times here. They're cutting down the times.
They definitely are cutting down the times. They're making it a lot closer between these things, and that makes me think we'll not have to wait very long. This voting results site though keeps crashing on me. So could somebody please tell me if we have a new premier? Because boy oh boy.
Are you trying to watch the actual results?
Well,
yeah, it's going to happen. We are going to have a premier and call them premier elect, premier select, premier designate. Yeah, I mean, we
oh my God, Dan Arnold, Chief Strategy Officer at Polera. You've decided to join us here, even taking you away from your corporate clients who you give such high value to.
You know what? He's got himself.
You know what?
Someone
He's got
explain to
Stephen
Dan how
Carter
the
audio.
system works.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm
Oh, there we go.
far less formal than you guys tonight. I had my softball game. I just got back. I'm watching some results.
So Dan, lay it on us here. What do you think? Like, this is closer, I think, than anybody anticipated. Maybe not anybody. I mean, I think I hedged pretty well, you know, being a very thoughtful individual last episode. But do you think Taves could pull this off, or what?
I don't know. I guess it's in Brian Jeans's hand right now, indirectly. I still think Smith probably pulls it out, but it probably is like a 51.4 situation, I think.
Oh, how good would 51.4 be?
I mean, it would be the new 78, you know, it's just a new percent in Alberta that we're always talking about. Yeah. I don't know.
This is
it's
pretty
coming
exciting.
back. Dan, you get to watch it live with us. Okay.
Dan, does this mean anything for the federal government? That was something that was asked of me earlier today. Does the federal government care? And my thinking is Justin Trudeau doesn't care. He doesn't win any seats here.
Yeah, but I think
Danielle Smith wins it.
if he's fighting Danielle Smith, I mean, that could be an interesting situation, right?
So Smith wins 54% to 46%, 53.7 to 46.2. Yeah.
That's disappointing. We missed out on 50. Yeah, that's disappointing.
And now we get a speech. Folks. United Conservative Party leader Danielle Smith. Wow. So took all of the ballots possible, and you know, a lot closer, I think, than people thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Well, I think we all knew that it was going to take this many ballots. I mean, Dan, what was it like watching from the heart and the center of the universe out there in in Toronto, where you make your family's home? No,
there are parties in all of the pubs in Little Alberta in Toronto tonight, celebrating the results.
Is there any truth to the rumor, Dan, that you had to leave Alberta because Corey Hogan was driving the Liberal Party in town?
And you just needed out. Yeah. I think
there's truth to every rumor. It's granules of truth in any rumor.
Oh man,
Corey and I could tell some great stories from the David Swan days, back when he was on the fast track to the premiership of Alberta.
Those glory days, you know, when Dan was just an anonymous blogger who was lighting the world afire, named Calgary Grit.
I reached out to that anonymous blogger in 2007 and got Dan to work with me on the best campaign in history. I won't name the campaign out of respect for Dan's reputation, but it was the best campaign I think I've ever worked on. Dan, Arnold, Kyle Olson, me. There's a few others, but really we were the heart of it. Hey, Dan?
Oh.
We were the mushy middle of the stop sign on that campaign.
That's such a good campaign. How has the federal Liberals not ever chosen that? You know, like how have they not chosen some of those designs that we did in 2007? I'm a little disappointed.
So Smith is giving the speech, has shouted out Crescent Heights, which is the neighborhood I live in. So already she's micro-targeting my support.
Yeah. Why is she shouting out?
Oh, her dad went to school there, I guess, Crescent Heights High School.
There you go. So she really is a city gal.
She's telling a story of pioneers and farmers. Listen, we're never going to be able to listen to this and give proper commentary, so I'm going to shut it off. I will understand, Dan, if you would actually prefer to watch the news than listen to us imagine what Danielle Smith is saying.
I want to ask Dan questions.
Okay, ask him a question.
Dan, do you think that this theory that Rachel Notley just picks up all those votes just because it's Danielle actually happens, or do Albertans just to their conservative lane and always continue to vote conservative regardless who the lunatic is that's leading the party?
Well, I mean, that's why I listen to the strategists to tell me these things. I'm a long expated Albertan, so I kind of I think it'll be an interesting election, though. I mean, you've got two very powerful figures in Notley and Smith, who are impressive politicians in their own right, and I think it'll be an interesting one to watch. She definitely shakes up the dynamics.
Yeah,
We will not be told what we need to put in our bodies in order to work or travel in the first 2 minutes of the speech.
It's the other countries that actually
landlocked or our energy phased out by virtue signaling prime ministers. Dan, you worked for that virtue signaling prime minister.
Dan probably drives a Tesla. Now, I bet you know what? In Toronto, he probably doesn't even have a car.
I bicycle everywhere. That's where.
Of course, you have a cargo bike.
So if you're curious,
oil goes into a bike.
If you're curious, I was looking on my spreadsheet here. So Smith got 26% of Brian Jean's vote. Taves got 47%, and then 27% dropped off with no second choice. So a fair bit of attrition there.
Interesting.
Yeah, that at least 2 or 3 of those to be attrition in my mind. I'd have to look at them a little bit more, but attrition is in part why Danielle Smith has won. And I don't think that that's a great start for her. She was supposed to be becoming a much bigger mandate. She did her provincial speech where she was like, I'm going to be premier on Monday. Now she is the premier. So she didn't have to walk that all the way back, but she's not exactly at the high point where you'd hope for her to be if you're one of her strategists. And does she have strategists or just loons? That's just a question. I'm just asking.
Well, listen. I'm watching this speech, and I'll tell you something. If you had no sound on, and I do have sound on, it's being droned out in my left ear by Stephen Carter, but she looks so comfortable and so happy up there, and just very warm. And obviously, it's easy to look happy when you've just won an election like this. But it does sort of remind me that there's an affableness that comes through. It's going to be interesting to see how this comes out in the next bit. Well, Carter, we lost your sound again, but you're muted. So this time it might not be static. It's still nothing.
It's incompetence. Dan, did you ever meet Danielle Smith? Have you ever spent time?
I can't say that I have. But from what I've seen, just, watch politics, she definitely is one of the more high ceiling, low floor politicians for sure. When she's on, she is warm. She's impressible. Even if you hate what she's saying, you kind of like her. But then she'll go and blame cancer patients for getting cancer, right? So it's one day you don't know what you're going to get, which is why I think there's a lot of uncertainty over what happens in the next couple of months here.
Yeah, she's not Donald Trump, and it would be a mistake to think she is, because Donald Trump is a fundamentally nasty person, and Danielle Smith is fundamentally actually pretty nice. But there is kind of that common core that you were talking about, which is this notion of the ceiling and the floor being so wildly different, and it's going to be interesting to see how much of that comes forward in the next bit and how Albertans feel about this.
Well, I'm interested to see what the polls tell us. I'm sure that Polero will be in the field probably within the next 24. Hey, I don't, you probably won't tell us what happened, but, it's going to be pretty exciting to see if the pickup that Janet Brown was finding that Calgarians were walking away from Danielle before she got elected, to see if that reverses itself now that she's been elected. I'm not sure this is a big enough mandate that it's going to reverse itself. I think that her squeaking over a little bit makes it a little bit harder for her to actually pick this up and pick up the support that she's looking for. But we'll see.
I think there will be a lot of interest in the first couple of polls coming out of this one. And, normally I would say doesn't mean a lot before the RIP period, but you've got a pretty person coming in here in Danielle Smith, and Rachel Notley, of course, ever knows who she is, right? As an ex-premier. So this isn't a case where these are party leaders, opposition leaders who nobody knows. These are pretty well-established figures. So I think it actually might be relatively meaningful, the polls we're seeing in the next little while, compared to in some situations when nobody knows who they are out of the gate.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, it is interesting to have two leaders who are known commodities that immediately come with both baggage and pros, like people who can think about Danielle Smith's time as Wild Rose leader, her time as the floor crosser who basically tried to torpedo the Wild Rose, and then her as a radio personality and a well-known pundit across the province. She is now going to be in an interesting position because if she does move quickly with being sworn in as premier and moving into that job with kind of like aggression, which is what we've been told to expect. I don't know. I mean, like we all of a sudden are going to see something very different in Alberta because people knew Danielle Smith as those things. We've never seen her govern. Right. And the one instance we have with her in kind of a quasi-governing role was with the school board, which was famously dissolved. So it's going to, it's a different set of tools. And it will be interesting to see how she interacts with the public service. It's something I'm obviously going to be watching very closely, just given my background. And I have quite a few friends up there. And then it's going to be interesting to see how she interacts with the public, with not just the rhetoric of saying things like they're never going to be able to give us and force us to have a needle to work, but the policy that needs to follow from there. We talked a bit about this last time we were on, Stephen, but what does it mean if all of a sudden health professionals don't have to be vaccinated in the province of Alberta?
Against things like hepatitis B, which has all but been eradicated in healthcare workers. And now all of a sudden everybody's going to be exposed to it and the effects that come from that. We don't have, there's not been this great uprising against the hepatitis B vaccination. Maybe there is in Toronto, Dan. I'm sure those people in Toronto don't like the hepatitis B vaccination.
Well, look,
by the way, any jobs out there, I'm asking for a friend.
The thing about politics is sound bites and governing is paragraphs and pages. It's different and there's nuance and there's context, and the flip answer is rarely the right answer. And having to make that pivot is something that a lot of leaders have struggled with. Will she struggle more or less? That's something we'll watch in the next bit. But because her answers are so soundbitey, these broad sweeping statements, these things that actually collide pretty quickly with fundamental notions like the Constitution and rule of law and your public health. What is this going to look like? And what are the consequences that come out of this? And will this be moderated? Because, I have reduced the volume of her speech for now just to engage with you two, some good friends of mine here. She wasn't moderating at the start. I mean, she led with her right hook here. Like, she's talking about the things that she wants to do to make a more conservative Alberta. And it's going to be interesting to see what Alberta thinks about that.
Boy, I'm nervous. Fortunately, I go to British Columbia tomorrow, so my world's going to be fine.
Well, and on that note,
hey, thanks for joining us with special guest star Dan Arnold. Thanks for joining the episode. Bye. Thanks.